So you know how in shadow work, you're supposed to become aware of your flaws and learn to love your flaws? Well, one of my flaws is that I'm arrogant and really outspoken and often disrespectful when I don't respect something. So let me just say this. The information out there on shadow work, especially what I've been able to find on YouTube, it's shit. The people there don't know what they're talking about. Shadow work is esoteric work. It's an occult science. It's advanced inner work. In order to do actual, real shadow work, you need to dive into occult science. If the people there are talking about how to do shadow work by keeping a journal, reflecting on your flaws, learning to take criticism, learning to love your inferior qualities, they don't know what they're talking about, really. So, I do know what I'm talking about, and that's my shadow of arrogance speaking. I do know what I'm talking about, and I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to teach you how to actually do shadow work. And this teaching will take 2 steps. The first step in this video, I'm going to explain to you what shadow work actually is, put it in its proper esoteric context, and explain the science of it to you so that you can actually grasp what it is that you're about to do. And then in the next video, I'm going to get extremely practical and show you the first steps to doing it on your own. So if you're serious, if you really actually want to do shadow work, let's go. Okay, so maybe I spoke a little harshly when I called the other shadow work out there shit. It's not shit. The people mean really well. They just don't know what they're talking about. But they have good intentions, so I'm sorry. I'm sorry. See, I get carried away. I'm passionate about this subject. So anyway, shadow work is esoteric. It's essentially alchemy. You're doing the most profound work on yourself. You're destroying your ego. You're stirring up your unconscious. You're diving into the depths of your unconscious. You're transforming all these archetypal, powerful forces in yourself. You're reforging your ego. It's real alchemy. It's not just sitting there reflecting on yourself with a journal. It's not just talking to your friends and saying, so what are my flaws? Tell me, I'm open to listening. It is that too. I mean, you need to be doing that. That's an integral part of it. Don't get me wrong. But it's more than that. Like I said, it's an esoteric science. And this esoteric science has predecessors. This is ancestral wisdom. Shadow work is Western alchemy. There's a tradition that goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. The alchemists were the ancestors of shadow work. They were the experts and masters of shadow work. Shadow work has an actual lineage of ancestral wisdom. And even that great 20th century alchemist, Carl Jung. Carl Jung is a very important figure if you're studying shadow work, because Carl Jung took the wisdom of the alchemists and he rephrased it in 20th century language. He rephrased this arcane wisdom in a very accessible language of modern psychoanalysis. So whereas the alchemists had this complex code language, Carl Jung used accessible terms like ego and unconscious, anima and shadow and individuation and the self archetype. These are very accessible terms that we have Jung to thank for, but the wisdom that Jung is drawing from comes from the unbroken lineage of Western alchemy. So to do shadow work, it's necessary to tap into this lineage of ancestral wisdom. So thanks to Jung, we have a really accessible language to approach these complex mysteries of alchemy. So I'm going to draw a diagram for you to explain it. It's very simple. Imagine that this circle right here is your ego. Your ego is your conscious I am. It's the extent of your I am awareness. But your ego is embedded within a bigger, higher body. Now Jung called this the unconscious, but the alchemists understood that this was actually another higher body. Esotericism calls it the astral body. Psychology calls the astral body the psyche. And it just so happens that a great portion of the psyche is unconscious is not connected to the ego. The ego is what is conscious. The astral body is partially conscious, and it's largely unconscious. So Jung just called the astral body the unconscious. But when we talk about the unconscious, we're talking about the psyche. So here we have the ego, and the ego is embedded within a larger, higher body. Let's call it the unconscious or the shadow. Most people are in a condition like this. Their ego is relatively small, their unconscious is relatively large, and more importantly, there is a very strong barrier between the ego and the unconscious. This is like an impenetrable wall. So the basic progress of shadow work is breaking down this wall and turning the ego around to face the astral body, to actually consciously face the unconscious, to strive to become conscious of the unconscious. And when you do that, this is what happens. At first, the ego-unconscious boundary gets destroyed and the ego goes through a crisis. And this is where shadow work becomes something along the lines of shamanic initiation. There is an ego dismemberment. Doing shadow work dismembers the ego. But the ego, the I, the awareness of the ego is still there. It's just not aware of its limits. But the I am awareness is still there. The I am awareness goes into the unconscious, goes into this territory, this unawakened realm of this higher body we're calling the astral body. So if you do shadow work, you incorporate new increments of this higher body, this sleeping astral body, this unconscious. And the ego can reform and integrate and assimilate new powers from the astral body. And this is what happens. The ego grows and it starts to unite with the astral body. So shadow work begins with the act of turning the ego's awareness inward towards one's own astral body. And in alchemy, we have a magical symbol for this. It is the symbol of the Ouroboros, the serpent that eats its own tail. This is the symbol for the beginning of the alchemical opus. This is the symbol for how to start doing shadow work. Let's say the ego is the head of the serpent, but the tail is the astral body, the parts of the astral body that the ego still doesn't know about. So when the ego eats its own tail, when the serpent eats its own tail, this is the ego turning its attention towards one's own astral body, diving into one's own astral body. And this begins a powerful process. And in this process, you need to be prepared because this is an intense process. Shadow work should be thought of as something along the lines of a shamanic initiation. You are descending into yourself, and you should expect to experience an ego death of sorts, an ego dismemberment, or at the very least an ego crisis. And you are diving into parts of yourself that you don't know about yet. You're about to find out, but you don't know about the powers that are lurking in your own astral body. This is a magical body. This is the body that shamans awaken. This is what gets awakened in shamanic initiation. This is exactly what shamanic initiation is. Diving into your own astral body and awakening your astral body and awakening the powers that are latent in the astral body. A shaman is simply somebody that has awakened their astral body and has imbued it with consciousness and can now consciously work in their astral body. So all of these things that a shaman can do, these are abilities that you gain when you awaken your astral body. So shadow work is essentially shamanic initiation. And the effects of shadow work are essentially the effects of becoming something like some sort of modern day shaman. So like I said, shadow work is serious business. It's not just reflecting on your flaws in a journal. It's actually deep initiatory work. So when you begin the process, let's say then the Ouroboros activates the process and you turn inward on yourself. Here's what happens. That barrier between the ego and the unconscious starts to break down. And in that area around, And this is what I said in the introductory video. In the area around, you will encounter the guiding spirit of shadow work. Because the unconscious, the sleeping parts of the astral body, it's not just chaos there. There's a guiding spirit there that comes to meet you when you begin this process, that guides you deeper into this process. The alchemists called this spirit Mercurius. Carl Jung called this spirit the archetype of the unconscious. But it's not just the unconscious, it's a guiding principle. It guides you deeper into the process, and it's necessary for you to understand the nature of this spirit. Mercurius is the trickster guide at the threshold. He can guide you across the threshold, and he can guide you deeper into the underworld. He's the psychopomp who guides you deeper into the underworld. So the crucial thing to understand about Mercurius, and this is very difficult to encapsulate the spirit. It'll take a whole curriculum of exploring the various complexities of the spirit. But the crucial thing to understand is that this is a catalyst for self-knowledge. This is a catalyst for shadow work. So how? How does it work as a catalyst for shadow work? So this is where we get into more esoteric territory. Every astral body contains within it a reflection of its own karma. In esoteric science, it's understood that reincarnation is real and that you make karma in all your incarnations. And as you make karma, it is stored in your astral body. And Mercurius is like the messenger of your karma. Mercurius is the face of your karma. Mercurius is who shows you your karma. So another word for this figure is the threshold guardian. This guardian confronts you with your karma and says, you may not proceed deeper into your astral body until you face yourself, until you accept what I am showing you. I am showing you the effect, the karmic effect of all your deeds in this lifetime and in previous lifetimes. So, you can only imagine if we've done lots of bad things in past lifetimes, then this figure may actually appear to us to be hideous. It's very easy to confuse this figure for some sort of hideous demon. And that is where people can fall into a bypass, a very big bypass. Because when people attempt to go deeper into their own soul, they are going to confront this figure. This figure, it's inevitable. It's going to face them. And in many cases, it may be hideous. It is the embodiment of all your trauma, of all your negative traits, of all the terrible things you've done in this lifetime and in past lifetimes, and in all the terrible things that have happened to you in this lifetime and in past lifetimes. It's a shape-shifting double. It's a shadow mirror that shows you what you need to work on in yourself, what you need to illuminate in yourself. But if you didn't know that, if you didn't know any better, you might think it was some sort of hideous beast and run away from it, or call a shaman to try to suck it out of you, or call an exorcist to try to exorcise it. And how disastrous would that be? You would be fragmenting from the very thing you need to embrace. You would be fragmenting from the very thing you need to illuminate and unite with in order to birth your higher self. So this figure is the messenger of your karma. And that is very important for you to understand. That is what shadow work is. It's not simply facing your flaws. It's facing your karma and transforming it. So some of you may be familiar with the story from Oscar Wilde, The Picture of Dorian Gray. So Dorian Gray is this beautiful libertine, and he does all these licentious things, and he lives a debaucherous life. Meanwhile, he remains physically beautiful. But this magical painting of him gets uglier and uglier. That magical painting, that is the mercurial mirror. That is the guide of shadow work. That is showing Dorian Gray what he's doing to his soul. that is showing to him what he needs to transform in order to do his shadow work. So we all have this within us, and it's necessary to learn how to recognize it. Now here's the catch. It's not just within us. Every single human being has this. This is a universal organ of the astral body. Every human has an astral body, just like every human has a heart, a brain, a spine. It's an organ of the higher body. Every human has it. And so, the mercurial spirit that's in us, it also interacts with the mercurial spirit in others. So we find ourselves in a situation when we begin this process of doing shadow work, that we're confronted not only by the mercurial spirit within ourselves, but our own mercurial spirit manifests and comes to us, approaches us through other people. And if we don't understand that, if we don't recognize that when it's happening, we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to do the same thing we do if we run from facing our own inner guardian. If we confront it in someone else and we judge it and fragment from it and distance ourselves from it and divorce ourselves from it, that is shadow work bypass. That is fragmenting from our own soul, approaching us through other people, through our friends, through our lovers, through our spouse, through our enemies, through our allies, through a random person we meet in the street, through a random person that we have the hots for. All of these people, through a random person that we just happen to run into through incredible synchronicity, all of these encounters, interpersonal encounters, are likewise encounters also with the mercurial spirit, showing us things in our own unconscious that we need to illuminate, that we need to unite with. So it is the ego, your conscious I am, your freely willing conscious I am that does the shadow work. And it takes effort. And if by your own efforts you manage to work on your own astral body, to awaken it, to heal it, because a lot of the times we need to work on our healing process, in almost every case, we need to work hard on our healing. And if by your own efforts you are able to transmute and shift around parts of your astral body, then the transformed parts of your astral body can unite with your ego. So imagine this, through your own ego's efforts, you are able to transmute parts of your shadow, parts of your unconscious, parts of your sleeping astral body. The parts that you are able to transmute, you can unite with. And if you unite with it, this births a new increment of your higher self. Now, I shouldn't use the term higher self. The actual esoteric term is spirit self. So the spirit self is what forms as a result of successful shadow work. So if you think about it, shadow work, it's actually something that all of humanity is meant to be doing, because this is the process of how we give birth to this new higher body. The ego transforms the astral body and unites with the astral body to form this new higher body. And this new higher body makes us like a shaman. This is what shamans have. This is what shamans have done. This is what spiritual masters have done. This is what yogis have done. They have transmuted their astral body through the efforts of their dedication, of their tapas, of their disciplines, of their alchemy. And they have mastered these parts of their astral body, and it's now part of their consciousness. And when you've done this, you gain powers. You gain abilities like astral travel. You gain the abilities to work on the astral bodies of others. You gain clairvoyance. You gain all manner of shamanic inspirations like visionary powers. You become a visionary artist. You become a medium. You become able to have channel spirits, work with spirits, become some sort of healer. This is the result of fruitful shadow work. This is the result of fruitful initiation work. So like I said, successful and authentic shadow work is akin to shamanic initiation. That's why I keep saying shadow work is serious. So I like to draw comparisons between the alchemical science and shamanic initiation. So as I say, shadow work is real alchemy. It's actually alchemy. It's not like alchemy. It is alchemy. It's the first stage of alchemy. If you're somewhat familiar with alchemy, you might have heard of the stages of the great work. The Negretto, the black stage, the Albedo, the white stage, the Rubedo, the red stage. Shadow work is the first stage of the alchemical opus. It is the Negretto. It is the black work. It is the descent into the underworld. So the underworld in this case is the parts of your own astral body. You're descending into your own astral body. And it is the mercurial spirit that guides you into this descent. It's the psychopomp who lures you deeper and deeper into the depths of your own being. So you've heard the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. Well, I would add to that as well, as within, so without. So this is really important to understand about Mercurius. Mercurius is in me, Mercurius is in you, Mercurius is in everybody. It is everywhere and it is nowhere. But this spirit, that is this omnipresent spirit, is responsible for coordinating synchronicities, and it also has this magical ability to allow you to do inner work outside of yourself. The contents of what are in you get projected into your outer environment. Mercurius, if you're not working consciously with Mercurius, he, she is the one who causes you to project your shadow onto other people. That's bad. But if you make an alliance with Mercurius, then Mercurius is what coordinates and guides your shadow work both within yourself and outside of yourself. Your shadow work is basically divided into introverted shadow work, where you turn inward and you dive into yourself. Like, let's say you lock yourself in an isolated environment and you dive inward. That's introverted shadow work, introverted inner work. But there is also extroverted shadow work, where you encounter your own unconscious shadows projected onto your environment outside of you. So Mercurius is the one who makes this projection happen and creates a kind of magnetism between your unconscious psyche and the person upon whom you are projecting. So if you are conscious of this and you're working consciously with Mercurius, then you can do shadow work through your interpersonal relationships. And that, I believe, is a full half of shadow work. So Mercurius guides you into the depths of your own being, or to put it in shamanic terms, it guides you into the underworld within yourself. Dive into yourself. But when you step out that door and you've activated Mercurius, then the encounters you have will also guide you deeper into the underworld out there. When you begin shadow work, you'll find that you start meeting certain types of people, certain types of mercurial people, shamans, sorcerers, femme fatales, bad boy lovers. If you're a heterosexual man, you could start a new relationship with a woman who lures you deeper into your sexual shadows, for example. If you're a woman, maybe you meet a man who starts unlocking things in you that you never knew existed. A kind of sorcerer, a kind of demon lover. It's at this point in life when we begin shadow work and we activate the mercurial spirit within ourselves that we find ourselves running into mercurial people out there. Shamans, tricksters, devils, tricksters on the street, charismatic devils. So as within, so without. Mercurius coordinates the affinity between what's going on within us and how we're guided into our external environment. Mercurius is the one who ensures that we encounter people that are embodying for us parts of our unconscious shadows that we need to assimilate, that we need to work with, that we need to become conscious of. When we have fights, that's Mercurius showing us things in ourself. When we have unbelievable sexual chemistry, that's Mercurius showing us things in our own astral body that we need to awaken and assimilate. Mercurius is responsible for magnetism of all forms. You know a magnet, you know how a magnet can go whoop. So Mercurius is responsible for sexual magnetism. Mercurius is responsible for interpersonal chemistry. But if you flip one of the sides of the magnet, woof, repels. Mercurius is the magnet responsible for attracting and repelling based on what's going on in our astral body and the astral body of others. So we're doing this shadow work on ourselves alone, but we're also doing shadow work with our environment. And it's thanks to Mercurius that is possible. So there are a couple categories of shadow work that are major themes. One of them has to do with our trauma. Our traumas are stored in our astral body. And another has to do with our sexuality. Our sexuality lives in our astral body. And so when Mercurius activates, she guides us deeper into our traumas and deeper into our sexuality. And sometimes these two are really intertwined. Sometimes our traumas are sexual. And so Mercurius guides us into our sexual traumas. And Mercurius guides us outside of ourselves too, into relationships with people who activate our sexual traumas or our latent sexual energy or our latent emotions that we're repressing, like our rage, our anger, our sadness, our depression. Mercurius guides us into relationships that force us to deal with them. So when you you ever been in a relationship and you can't explain why and how you got into a relationship? It seems like a self-destructive relationship. But when you analyze it, that it has to do with your own shadows and your own trauma. That's Mercurius who guided you there. So Carl Jung had a name for the shape-shifting nature of Mercurius. When it's a feminine spirit in the psyche of a male, he called it the anima. So for a man, a heterosexual man, Mercurius can take the form of the sort of femme fatale or the siren or the very sexually attractive woman who lures us deeper into our own desires, who lures us deeper and deeper into our own sexual shadows or our own undiscovered sexual potential. And in a woman, Jung called it the animus. It is the masculine. It is a kind of sexy devil, a kind of bad boy that lures you, that holds the promise of unlocking your potential, unlocking these magical feminine powers that you have. So the figure is not male or female. It's both. It's always the object of desire. It's the magnet. It is what you desire that lures you deeper into your astral body where your desires are found and are located. In all cases, Mercurius is acting like a psychopomp, a guide of souls, a guide deeper into yourself that lures us deeper into the underworld of ourself. So the key to grasping this elusive nature of Mercurius is to understand how she weaves in and out of you and other people, connecting consciousness together, weaving not just the consciousness, but the energetic charge of consciousness is what patterns the chemistry of consciousness, the desire charge of consciousness. When two consciousnesses feel that's the work of Mercurius. So Mercurius is woven into our psyche and it's woven into the psyche of all human beings. It is an archetype of the collective unconscious itself. The alchemists had a special name for this. They called it the soul of the world. The soul of the world, the anima mundi. So shadow work is the first stage of the alchemical process. If you are called to do shadow work, you are being called to embark on the great work. You are being called to some sort of shamanic journey. So, if you're still listening to this, that implies that you're serious. And so you're probably wondering, okay, I understand this concept. How do I start? Well, remember the Ouroboros? You have to actively and willfully go inward. So there are a number of techniques for doing that. Specific techniques. Techniques of entering into trance. Techniques of journeying into your astral body. And not just into yourself, but into your past. And not just into your personal past, into the collective past. Into your ancestral past. Into your past lifetimes even. To make an effort to go back. To go in and go back. So there are a number of techniques that you can use to do that. In the next video, I'm going to go over some of these techniques in more depth, but just very briefly. There's trance-inducing things like listening to a repetitive drum beat, meditating, and psychedelics. Psychedelics are perhaps the most intense way to do shadow work. They immediately activate your astral body. They work to dissolve your ego, and through the effect of the psychedelic, you are essentially doing shadow work. To take a psychedelic is to do shadow work. So if you take a big dose of mushrooms or take a big cup of ayahuasca, you are essentially diving in to shadow work. In that case, you have your mercurial guide inside of you, but also the shaman who is accompanying you on the mushroom trip or the ayahuasca journey is also acting like the role of Mercurius, guiding you deeper into yourself, being a psychopomp. So in this way, shamans are like mercurial individuals. They're actual like living embodiments of Mercury, of the mercurial spirit. They are helpers. They are guiding spirits in the shadow work process. So I'm not saying that you need to take psychedelics to really do shadow work in earnest. No, Carl Jung pioneered a way of doing shadow work, real shadow work, without psychedelics, although it's questionable whether or not he did do psychedelics. He's certainly secretive about it if he did. He may have. But his psychology does not require psychedelics, although I think it benefits from it. However, you can do a great deal of work through what Jung called active imagination, through dream work, through journaling your dreams, and through doing active imagination, through really actively engaging in your astral body with all the efforts you can muster and journaling it, making the effort to journal it. This is what Jung did, and this is shadow work. So it takes effort, it takes a discipline, there's a science to it, and this is what I teach at the School of Modern Soul Science. How to do this inner work. So in order to do shadow work, you need a worthy vessel to catch the process. This is a theme that we see from alchemy. The alchemists always spoke about catching the mercurial serpent in a vessel so that it can be transformed. It's likewise with your soul. You need to catch your soul in a vessel, catch the mercurial spirit in your soul in a vessel, in order to transform it. So this is one of the things I've created in the School of Modern Soul Science. I've created a school to do shadow work, and this is a vessel. So we've reached a threshold now. You've heard my presentation on shadow work, on how serious it is and what it involves. And now the question is, do you want to proceed? And I stand before you as a threshold guardian. If you want to proceed, I give you two options. In the description, in the link below, is the extroverted option. This is the School of Modern Soul Science online community. This is a community of remarkable individuals who are all committed to doing shadow work, real shadow work. So if you're going to do shadow work, it's very important to have the right sort of support, and that's why the school community is really valuable. This is an ideal vessel for shadow work. It has the support of your fellow peers, and it has the support of me as the teacher and as the guide of the community. And on the other hand, there is the next video. And the next video is more of the introverted option that gives you step-by-step instructions on the first stages of doing shadow work on your own. Now, this isn't a complete course. This is just the first stages of shadow work. This is just to help get you started. If you want a full course, you're going to have to join the school. On the other hand, there is a lot of work that you can do on your own. So in the link below, you can find out more information about the online community. And in this next video right here, you can continue to learn how to do shadow work.